Welcome to the Gaming Vanguard podcast, bringing you your weekly briefing of curated news from the front lines of the video game industry. I'm your host, Jeremy, and I would like to extend a sincere thank you to our listeners for your continued support of this podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest gaming news, and consider joining our community of gamers over at gamingvanguard.com. Now for this week's headlines. Welcome to the Gaming Vanguard podcast, and these are your 10 stories for the month of February. 1. Resident Evil Requiem becomes the fastest selling entry in franchise history. Capcom's latest survival horror blockbuster surpassed expectations with over 5 million units sold within its first 5 days. It is now the fastest selling entry in the history of the franchise. By comparison, the 2023 Resident Evil 4 Remake took 3 months to hit that number, and 2021's Resident Evil Village took 5 months. The game's commercial performance was equally staggering on PC. It had the series' biggest ever launch on Steam by far, beating out Resident Evil 4 Remake's launch numbers by some 100,000 concurrent players, with a peak exceeding 344,000. Resident Evil Requiem also topped the PlayStation Store download charts in both the US and Europe for February 2026. On the Switch 2 eShop, it sits comfortably in the top 2 alongside Pokemon Pokopia. Critics were enthusiastic. Nintendo Life called it an experience paced to perfection, praising the dual-protagonist setup, nostalgic story, and blend of action and survival horror. Capcom credited the game's success to photorealistic visuals powered by its RE engine, multiple difficulty settings that accommodate everyone from newcomers to experienced players, and the ability to switch between first-person and third-person perspectives in real time. The game's marketing was also lauded as a masterclass, with Capcom choosing Summer Game Fest over a PlayStation exclusive reveal to reach a broader multi-platform audience, and partnering with brands including Nvidia, Porsche, and Fortnite. With the Resident Evil series now sitting at 183 million lifetime units, Requiem has cemented itself as a strong early Game of the Year contender. 2. Slay the Spire 2 Early Access launch shatters Steam records. The sequel to one of the most beloved roguelike deck builders of all time didn't just meet expectations, it obliterated them. Slay the Spire 2 launched in early access on March 5th, 2026, and within days, Megacrit's deck-building roguelike had climbed to a peak of 526,000, securing a spot in the platform's all-time top 20 most played games, and marking the biggest single game launch on Steam in 2026 so far. To put that into perspective, the original Slay the Spire peaked at 57,000 concurrent players on Steam across its entire lifetime. The sequel surpassed that figure many times over within its first few days. The game holds an overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam, with 97% of over 14,000 user reviews recommending it. That kind of approval during early access is virtually unheard of. The sequel introduces several major new features, including 4-player online co-op with multiplayer-specific cards and team synergies, 2 brand new playable characters alongside returning favorites, and new mechanics including Doom, Stars, Forge, enchantments, quests, and afflictions. The game also fully migrated away from Unity, now running on Godot, a free and open source engine, which the team says better supports the multiplayer features and visual improvements. At $24.99 during early access, the low price point clearly helped lower the barrier for both returning fans and newcomers curious about the genre. By comparison, Marathon, which launched the same day, peaked at around 88,000 concurrent players and quickly fell outside the Steam top 10, while Slay the Spire 2 dominated the top 3. Console players on PS5, Xbox, and Nintendo Switch 2 will need to wait for the full 1.0 release, currently estimated for 2027. For a $25 indie title from a small studio, this launch is nothing short of a phenomenon. 3. World of Warcraft Midnight launches as most transformative expansion in years. Blizzard's 11th expansion for its legendary MMORPG arrived with enormous expectations and largely delivered. GameSpot argued ahead of release that Midnight has already brought more foundational changes to Blizzard's 22-year-old MMORPG in the last few months than in the entire 6-year period between Legion and Dragonflight. The expansion sends players back to the legendary Blood Elf Kingdom of Kel'Thas, reimagining iconic zones like Eversong Woods and Silvermoon City from the ground up, while introducing two entirely new areas, the bioluminescent jungle of Harandar and the hostile Voidstorm. On Metacritic, the expansion earned strong critic scores, including a 90 from CG Magazine and an 80 from Games Radar. CG Magazine's reviewed praised Midnight for taking what made the War Within great and continuing to refine the experience, highlighting new features like player housing and the prey hunting system. PC Games N went as far as saying that Midnight truly ushers in a new era of World of Warcraft, an era of modernization essential to its survival in an increasingly competitive MMO genre. Perhaps the most controversial change was Blizzard's decision to heavily restrict combat add-ons, replacing them with built-in UI tools like a damage meter, cooldown manager, and boss timeline. PC Gamer noted that after playing a good amount of Midnight, they didn't miss WoW's combat add-ons or older class design as much as expected, and that Blizzard can now design raid difficulty around coordination and strategy rather than making mechanics more frantic. Housing, a feature fans have requested for nearly 2 decades, has also been embraced warmly, giving players a new social hub that many say has rekindled their sense of community within the game. 4. Bungie launches Marathon to mixed community reception and quick fixes. Bungie's return to its original franchise after nearly 30 years was one of the most scrutinized launches of the year. Marathon is a first-person multiplayer extraction shooter released on March 5th, 2026 for PlayStation 5, Windows, and Xbox Series X, with full cross-play and cross-save support. The game launched to a 91% positive user score on Steam, based on nearly 5,000 English-language reviews. A genuinely strong critical reception, but player numbers told a more complex story. At launch, Marathon peaked at just under 90,000 concurrent players on Steam, and while these are solid numbers, Bungie will be looking for growth, especially since its closest rival, Arc Raiders, had a peak player count of over 460,000 during its launch month. The community backlash was swift and focused on 2 main issues. Players were frustrated by a microtransaction model where runner skins cost 1,120 Lux in the store, but the $10 currency bundle only grants 1,100 Lux, forcing players to spend $15 for a single cosmetic. The game's punishing difficulty curve also drew criticism, as dying in Marathon means losing everything, not just looted items, but everything brought into the run, which, combined with aggressive enemy AI and scarce ammo, created a brutal early experience for newcomers. Console Creatures review in progress captured the overall mood, noting that the barrier to entry feels high and the UI and onboarding are messy, but reserved final judgment for when the endgame Cryo Archive Zone opens later in March. Bungie responded quickly, confirming changes to its in-game currency structure and outlining its first patch from March 9th through 15th, framing its response as the beginning of an ongoing conversation rather than a one-time fix. Whether Marathon can build sustained momentum remains the biggest open question in live service gaming right now. 5. GTA 6 November 2026 release date looms amid persistent skepticism. Grand Theft Auto 6 continues to be the single most anticipated entertainment product in the world, and also one of the most delayed. The game is now slated for release on November 19th, 2026, following a pushback from its previously set May 2026 date. Take-Two announced the delay alongside its July-September quarterly earnings results in November 2025, pushing the game 6 months further out. Skepticism about whether the November date will hold remains widespread. Take-Two CEO Strauss Zelnick said that the company feels really good about the new release date, but many noted that this is exactly what he said, down to the same phrasing when GTA 6 was pushed from fall 25 to May 26. The delay has had a cascading effect on the entire industry's calendar. VGC noted that developers across the industry had scrambled to avoid GTA 6's original window, only for it to be delayed again, and little is known about what's planned for the second half of 2026, partly because of that uncertainty. Rockstar also faced internal turmoil, with over 200 workers signing a letter demanding that fired staffers be reinstated, and UK lawmakers raising concerns about the situation. Bloomberg's Jason Schreier reported that the delay was not directly caused by the firings, warnings, but acknowledged that the fallout could have a long-term impact on the project. Despite all the uncertainty, GTA 6 remains the most wishlisted and most discussed game of the year by virtually every available metric: social engagement, trailer views, article coverage, and community speculation. The entire gaming industry is essentially holding its breath until November. 6. Pokemon Pokopia launches as franchise highest rated game on Metacritic. Pokemon's 30th anniversary celebration arrived not through a traditional RPG, but through an unexpected life simulation spin-off that has captivated critics and fans alike. At the time of this writing, Pokemon Pokopia holds an 89 on the Metacritic scoring system based on 50 reviews, placing it ahead of every previous Pokemon title on the aggregator, and making it the highest rated Pokemon game of all time on the platform. Major outlets were nearly unanimous in their praise. IGN awarded a 9 of 10, GameSpot a 9 of 10, Game Informer a 9 of 10, and Games Radar a 4.5 out of 5. Nintendo Life called it one of the most robust and enticing Pokemon games ever, praising how the game adds warmth to the series' collection by asking players to discover where Pokemon like to live, what they like to eat, and how their abilities help make the world a better place. The game is set in a post-apocalyptic Kanto, starring a Ditto who shapeshifts into human form to rebuild ruined cities and restore habitats. The Cubed 3 review described it as a technical showcase of a world that rarely stutters, and called it a potential system seller for the Switch 2. Mobile Syrup highlighted how the game eschews the repetitive gym-to-gym structure of mainline entries, instead emphasizing ecological rebuilding rather than battling, a message that resonated with reviewers and players. On the Switch 2 eShop, Pokopia has claimed the #1 spot for 2 consecutive weeks, holding off even Resident Evil Requiem. Not everyone was completely sold. Some critics noted repetitive building quests and unnecessarily time gating, but the overwhelming consensus is that Pokopia represents a bold and successful new direction for the franchise. 7. Hollow Knight Silksong expands its reach with Game Pass Edition and upcoming DLC. While Hollow Knight Silksong originally launched in September 25, the beloved Metroidvania continued to make major headlines throughout early 26. In March, the game was added to Game Pass Premium, expanding its availability alongside its existing presence on Game Pass Ultimate and PC Game Pass tiers. This move brought the notoriously challenging action-adventure to millions of additional players. Team Cherry revealed that Silksong has sold more than 7 million copies, noting that this figure does not include millions more playing it via Game Pass. The studio also announced that its first free expansion, Sea of Sorrow, which will feature a nautical theme and new areas to explore, new bosses, and new tools. The DLC announcement came shortly after Silksong won Best Action Adventure Game at the Game Awards 2025, where it was nominated for multiple categories, including Game of the Year. Despite its critical success, the game's difficulty remained a polarizing topic in the community. Some reviewers appreciated how the challenge gave the game character and integrated gameplay with the story, while others found it tiring and demoralizing, feeling it inhibited the sense of exploration. Various mods to make the game easier were created within days of the original launch. On Steam, Silksong maintains a very positive rating, with 93% of over 136,000 user reviews being positive. With the Sea of Sorrow expansion on the horizon and no set release date beyond 2026, Silksong remains one of the most actively discussed indie games in the industry, proof that Team Cherry's patient approach continues to pay dividends. 8. Nintendo Switch 2's packed March lineup defines the console's first full year. The Nintendo Switch 2 entered 2026 with momentum, but March is where its library truly began to feel substantial. The month delivered a wave of both exclusives and multi-platform titles that made the console feel like a must-have. The Switch 2 eShop charts for the week of March 8th show the depth of the lineup. Pokemon Pokopia at #1, followed by Resident Evil Requiem, Monster Hunter Stories 3, WWE 2K26, Pokemon Legends ZA Switch 2 Edition, Mario Kart World, and Animal Crossing New Horizons Switch 2 Edition. Games Radar noted that March has been off to an exciting start following the launch of Resident Evil Requiem, and highlighted the role of the PlayStation State of Play 2026 showcase and the Nintendo Indie World stream in building momentum for the platform. The Switch 2 also received enhanced editions of beloved games, including Super Mario Bros. Wonder, with a new Bella Bell Park Park Edition, and Disney Dreamlight Valley. According to the GDC 2026 State of the Game Industry Report, 39% of developers said that they're interested in making games for the Nintendo Switch 2, putting it on par with the Steam Deck as a development priority. Resident Evil Requiem's physical sales data in Japan showed 38,000 copies sold on Switch 2 in its opening week, alongside 155,000 on PS5, demonstrating that third-party AAA titles are finding a real audience on Nintendo's new hardware. With Super Mario Galaxy Movie arriving in April and more first-party titles expected throughout the year, the Switch 2 is positioning itself as a serious contender in the broader gaming ecosystem. 9. Crimson Desert builds massive hype ahead of its March 19th launch. Pearl Abyss's Crimson Desert has been one of the most watched games in development for years, and as its March 19th release date approaches, anticipation reaches a fever pitch. PC Gamer's Harvey Randall described the combat in his preview as a blend inspired by Breath of the Wild and Dragon's Dogma 2, a comparison that immediately captured the attention of the action RPG community. Newsweek positioned Crimson Desert alongside Resident Evil Requiem as a title with the potential to rival it for Game of the Year. The game is set in the fictional world of Pywell and follows Cliff, a member of the Greymanes, in an open world filled with rival factions, strange beasts, and magical forces. It was originally planned as a prequel to the Black Desert Online MMO, but was changed to be a standalone single-player title with its own narrative. That pivot from an MMO spin-off to a fully realized single-player experience has been one of the game's biggest selling points, as it promises all the visual fidelity Pearl Abyss is known for, but now channeled into a focused, story-driven adventure. GameSpot highlighted Crimson Desert as one of the marquee titles anchoring the back half of March, noting that it aims to monopolize players' free time alongside Legacy of Kain Ascendance. The game has been climbing Steam wishlists steadily and represents one of the biggest bets from a Korean studio on the global single-player market. Whether it can deliver on its extraordinary visual promise and ambitious open-world design will become clear when reviews drop around launch. But as of right now, the hype is as high as it gets. 10. Video game industry continues to navigate the post-layoff crisis. Behind the excitement of new releases, the gaming industry is still reeling from years of devastating job losses, and 2026 has offered no reprieve. The GDC 26 State of the Game Industry Report revealed that 28% of surveyed games industry workers reported being laid off in the past 2 years. That percentage was even higher in the United States, where 33% of respondents said they'd been laid off. Half of all respondents said their current or most recent employer had conducted layoffs in the past year. The human cost is staggering. 2/3 of respondents at AAA studios said their companies had experienced layoffs, and 1/3 of people working at indie studios reported the same. Of those laid off, 48% said they still hadn't found a new job. The pipeline of future talent is also at risk. 3/4 of surveyed students said they are concerned about their future job prospects, citing the lack of entry-level positions, increased competition from laid-off workers with more experience, and AI-led displacement. The first months of 2026 have continued the trend. January alone saw VR studio Cloudhead Games cut 70% of its workforce. It saw Meta shutter Armature, Sanzaru Games, and Twisted Pixel while cutting 10% of Reality Labs. Playtika cut 15% of its staff, and Ubisoft closed studios in Halifax and Stockholm while canceling 6 games as part of a massive restructuring. In February, Sony closed Bluepoint Games, Tencent shuttered TiMi Montreal, and publisher Nacon filed for insolvency. The game industry layoffs tracker estimates that 13 studios have been shut down in 2026 already, with approximately 1,500 layoffs. And it's only March. While blockbuster launches like Resident Evil Requiem and Slay the Spire 2 demonstrate that consumer demand remains strong, the disconnect between commercial success and workforce stability continues to define this era of the industry. That does it for this week in March 2026. Thank you all for listening, and be sure to head over to gamingvanguard.com. We have a giveaway right now. We're giving away some merch, so please check it out. I appreciate everyone. Thank you for your follows. Thank you for subscribing. Check out the YouTube. Check me out on Twitch. And as always, be good to each other and yourself. Take care. Peace.